Okay, friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our video channel. We're with executive producer Huck, who's in the room taking a little nap. Loves those ears rubbed. And she's being a good girl. So, she said Dad's been doing a good job lately, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'll do my best. And this is a missing person segment. And we got a couple quite interesting cases for you today. And we're going to have an excerpt from my book, Tribal Bigfoot, in this missing person segment. Quite surprising, isn't it? So, away we go, and Huck's asleep. So the first case is out of Minnesota. I spent a lot of time in Minnesota when Ben was growing up because we went to a place called Minnesota Hockey Camp every summer from the time he was 8 years old till he was 21 years old. And he went to train with the best hockey players in the world there. And the camp is an unbelievable place. Best college players, best NHL players. There's nothing to do there. It's in Brainerd, Minnesota. I love Brainerd. It's a great town, great area, lots of water recreation, super nice people. The Grillos own Minnesota Hockey Camp. And Mr. Grillo was a general manager of the San Jose Sharks. A pure coincidence. But several people said, you know what, if your boy has any talent, you got to send him there. And Ben loved it. It's hardcore hockey at its best. So I can talk to you about this location where this happened at very clearly. Northern Minnesota. A woman named Anna G. Wilson, 46 years old, went missing May 7th, 1929. East of Big Fork, Minnesota, 23 miles east. And she was a retired Minneapolis school teacher. In 1926, she filed a claim with the state of Minnesota and in the county of Itasca on a cabin and some property. And in Minnesota, you had to live in the residence a certain period of time to establish residency and to get the claim. And she also owned a home while she was teaching in downtown Minneapolis. And you might want to look this up, 2946 Russell Avenue North in Minneapolis. Obviously, it doesn't look like it did in 1929, but the home is still there. And she retired as a teacher. Well, every year she'd go up, for the previous 3 years, she'd go up to this cabin. Now, where is that cabin? I'm going to show it to you. This is Big Fork, Minnesota, right up here. This is Red Lake. This is Cass Lake. Leech Lake Native American Reservation, Chippewa National Forest, Deep River. I've spent a ton of time in this area. A ton of time researching Bigfoot. But her cabin was in this area now known as the George Washington State Forest. Super rural, super thick. I'm telling you, I've been in there and I've been spooked every time I've gone into those woods. Something weird is always going on there. So her story would just be bizarre if I could get into her mind and understand what she went through. But on June 2nd, a rural mail carrier named Dalfred Lundquist attempted mail delivery at Anna's cabin. And he determined that she wasn't living there anymore and nobody was there. And he contacted U.S. Forest Rangers to go in and check. And on the 4th, U.S. Forest Rangers responded to the cabin, couldn't find her. The cabin was padlocked. They searched the entire area and they never found a footprint. And they notified the Itasca County Sheriff. Well, Deputy Sheriff Z.A. Cochran went to the property, forced entry into the door, and found a diary with the last entry of May 7th, and she had been there since May 1st. So it was now June 5th. So it had been almost a month without anyone knowing what happened to her. The sheriff described an unusual scene. Found the diary, and it abruptly stopped on May 7th, and it was unfinished writing. The table was set as though Anna was ready to sit down for dinner. There was newly baked bread and beans on the stove. They searched the area, and there's lakes everywhere in this area of Minnesota. But they went outside and they looked around, and halfway to the nearest lake, they found her pail that she used for water laying on the ground. Not normal. So it could be surmised that she was getting ready to eat dinner and needed water, and she ran out to get some water. But it's hard for me to understand why she would padlock the door if she was just going out to get water. Don't understand that. Now, there were transients in the area from a local lumber mill, but they were good people, supposedly, from the sheriff. Everyone was questioned at that lumber mill, and people in the area were tracked down during the search. There was a letter found in the cabin that Anna had written on May 7th, the day she disappeared, that was addressed to her mother. On June 8th, and it was just a standard letter apparently, nothing intriguing. On June 8th, the Minnesota Department of Criminal Apprehension took over the case. And on June 10th, they brought 30 searchers into the area with the feeling that there could have been something criminal that happened to her. They contacted her sisters and her brothers who had arrived now and were helping in the search. And they said Anna was somebody that would always notify them immediately when she came out of the wilderness. She was very attentive to her mom. She was a caring person. She wouldn't walk off and not contact people. Now, the Itasca County Sheriff, a man named Hammond, was interviewed by a local paper. And he stated she's either lost in the woods or voluntarily left. Everyone in close proximity was checked, and the ground around the area was walked and searched multiple times. This is Anna. Well, interesting thing is that Anna's relatives were all contacted about the sheriff's response, and they called it ludicrous. Anna would never have gotten lost in the woods. She'd been there for 3 years, knew the area like you know your backyard. The sheriff also said that he was 100% positive she wasn't in the area deceased. The Minnesota Department of Criminal Division was also interviewed, and they stated there were no suspects. So what they did is they upped the ante. From June 11th to June 21st, there were 20 to 40 searchers daily. Nothing was found. So let's go through the theories that were proposed. Theory number 1, Anna got lost in the woods. Well, when you have a cabin deep in the woods, one of the things you do is you must like hiking, you must like the outdoors. So you go around, check things out, look for the nearest lake, maybe a fishing spot, animal life. No, Anna didn't get lost. I don't believe that one at all. Theory number 2, she voluntarily left. Well, the people that knew her best, her relatives, stated that that was something that would never happen. And she had a letter going to her mom that was not delivered. So the idea that she wrote the letter and then voluntarily walked away, that makes no sense at all. If she was going to voluntarily walk away, she would have taken the letter and mailed it. Now, this area I've been in a lot. What happened was that when Ben was in camp for the day, in training, the only time you could watch as a parent is when they were on the ice, and you could sit in the arena there, and every once in a while I did. But when he wasn't in the arena and he was training, then I would drive up to this area and do research. I'd contact people, talk to people. And in tribal Bigfoot, I went to the area and I met a man named Bill Bobolink, Native American. And here's what I wrote. I spent the night in Deer River, and I got an early start contacting Bigfoot witnesses at the Leech Lake Native American Reservation. The first stretch of roadway I hit was Highway 2, the main road between the reservation. It goes from Deer River west towards Bena and crosses the mighty Mississippi River. But the Mississippi isn't so mighty up north. It isn't. It's little more than a creek. This area of northern Minnesota is very wet, almost boggy. The areas have very thick forests that are almost impenetrable. If you like to hunt, the best idea is to set up in an open meadow or on the fringe of the meadow and wait for wildlife to cross. The meadows that you walk through are treacherous because of the many creeks that flow through below ground level and are only covered with light grass. You can easily fall into a bog. If all the moss, grass, and creeks don't bother you, the clouds, mosquitoes will, guaranteed. I've been up in northern Minnesota, and I've seen clouds move across in front of me that were just masses of mosquitoes. The first stop was the Bobolink residence on Highway 2 outside of Bena. I'd been told that they had a Bigfoot visitation on their land. I knocked on the door. They were very hospitable people and were willing to talk, even though they were part of the local tribe. I knocked on the front door, was immediately greeted by one of the Bobolink girls. I was directed to the living room where Bill was sitting in a large chair. There's Bill right there. A super, super nice man. Bill was hard of hearing, and he asked me to speak up. I asked him if it was true that he had a Bigfoot sighting on his property. He stated it had happened in the fall of 2002 at approximately 8 p.m., just at dark. He looked out front of his home for some reason and saw a huge creature standing in the front yard. It was about 7 feet tall, completely covered in hair, very muscular and healthy. Standing on 2 feet, looked somewhat like a human. He was looking at it, and it started to move around the side of the house towards the backyard. He switched his position and watched the creature from a back window as it slowly made its way into the forest behind the house. It was not running. It was moving almost at a walking pace, slightly bent forward, knees bent, and moving with purpose. It appeared not to have a neck, and its hair was 4 to 6 inches long over its entire body. Bill said he had yard lights in the front and the back, and that aided him in viewing the biped. I questioned Bill about the facial structure of the Bigfoot, and he answered that it didn't have any hair on its face, but there was hair on almost all other areas of the body. He described the hair as a medium brown in color and consistent over its entire body. He felt that it was healthy, middle-aged Bigfoot in perfect health. One of the last items that Bill mentioned was that Bigfoot had visited his house several times in the past 5 years, and he didn't quite understand why. Bill signed the affidavit, and I took a photo. His wife had been sitting in the room with us, along with a young girl named Jenny Dick. Jenny was their granddaughter, and they were babysitting while her mom was out. As I was leaving, I turned and thanked the people for allowing me into their home, and I shook Jenny's hand. I told her that any time she or anyone in the house had information about Bigfoot or had another sighting of the hominid, to please give me a call. In a very soft but assured voice, Jenny asked, "Do you want to hear about my Bigfoot sighting?" I was stunned. And her grandmother said, you'd want to talk to her. She had a very good sighting. I said, I absolutely wanted to hear about it. And I immediately sat back down in the kitchen with Jenny. Now, the story I just told you was pretty mundane. But Bill's property backed up to the wilderness area that we're talking about. And it was huge. And Bigfoot in this area is not unknown. And the Native Americans hold it in reverence and think of it as another tribe of people. Now, I was there off and on for a week with Ben on that trip. And I got called by another neighbor of his. And this story is one of the best stories I ever heard. Again, backing up to the wilderness. A woman and her husband were in this kitchen area. They heard something in the backyard and they look outside. And they see a Bigfoot sitting on its butt. Almost Indian style. And it's looking up at the clothesline that went across the yard. And the clothesline's about 6 feet, 7 feet off the ground. Just high enough to you so you can reach it. It's Bigfoot sitting on the ground, looking at the clothespins, and flicking the clothespin and watching it spin around on the clothesline. And the woman said that that Bigfoot did it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Just kept doing it, kept doing it. Folks, you cannot make that up. That cannot be made up. I asked her, of course, if anyone took a picture. No. But they don't look at it like an anomaly. They look at it just like somebody visiting. Some of the ladies were scared of it, not because they did any direct harm to them or anyone else, but just because of the size. Fascinating area. Fascinating. Now, one of the other things I did is some people said, oh, there's this Bigfoot researcher down the road here. And I went down to this body shop and I met these guys, really nice guys. And we started talking, and about an hour into the talk, they said, hey, Dave, you into UFOs too? I go, yeah. He said, you know, we have a ton of UFO sightings around here. We see them all the time, hovering above water, lakes, swamps, bogs. I said, you're kidding. I said, no. It's been going on for decades. Wow. Another correlation between Bigfoot and UFOs. What can I say? Well, when I see these associations like this, I'm going to bring them up. I'm going to talk to you about them. And tribal Bigfoot, you buy it in our store when the store's open. I know it's not open now, but it will be soon. And it's got almost a perfect rating on Amazon. So I'm pretty proud of that book. Next story. Oh, by the way, Anna Wilson was never found. Friends, relatives, family, daughters. I mean, not daughters, but her mom never heard from her again. Don't know what happened. Next incident happened in Tucson, Arizona. Thomas Howard, a very, very distinguished looking man, 74 years old. This is Thomas, missing May 31st, 1930. He was staying with his daughter at 803 West Congress Street in Tucson. And he was visiting his daughter from Rainy River, Minnesota. Daughter's name was Florence Howard, and he was a circuit minister. Some people called him a pastor. Now, Tucson, just south of Phoenix, and the address is just on the other side of the freeway, which the freeway obviously didn't exist then. But every day, Thomas liked to take a walk. Every day. It didn't matter the heat. He was used to it. He just liked to walk. And in late May, his daughter, Florence, had some friends visiting from Minnesota, the area from where her dad lived. And they left on the 30th of May. And on the 31st, Dad was taking a walk. Well, he didn't come back. At this point in time, the area of this house, the desert was at the doorstep, and he liked to walk in the desert. Well, on June 1st, the morning after he walked and didn't come back, the daughter notified the local police. They came out, they searched the desert, they searched the area around the house. They couldn't find anything, and they were a little confused because the desert was pretty wide open. Well, 6 days later, the Pima County Sheriff's Department was trying to find a plane where they could fly the desert and look for Thomas, and they found it. And Deputy W.G. Richardson flew on a plane piloted by Leroy Severns, who took Richardson and flew the region for 2 hours in an area where they thought Thomas could get to. They found nothing. Well, just prior to that, on the 7th of June, there was a witness named L.G. Bach and another individual saw Thomas in the area of 6th and Congress Street. Now, both these witnesses were employed by the Arizona Bank and Trust, considered to be very reliable. And the one reason they called is because this was in the story was in the local paper. And they looked at the photo and they said, "Oh, I think that's the man we were talking to," because he was also asking how he could get a ride to Minnesota. They thought maybe something was wrong, so they called the Tucson police at that point. And Officer Charles Hines came out and interviewed this man. Now, they never got his name, but he did complain of sore feet. And the police released him thinking he was just your everyday hitchhiker. So it was the following day that Deputy Richardson went up in a plane, flew the entire area of the town and the desert, hoping to find somebody. And there were other witnesses that said that they saw Thomas in the Congress Hotel around the same time frame. The searchers were absolutely baffled because Thomas didn't know anybody in this area. He knew nobody other than his daughter. So how he was surviving, where he was staying, he had no money, nobody knew anything. But he was a pastor and a minister, and he could talk. And everyone liked him when he talked. On June 9th, the deputies searched again on foot, massive search. Well, the search started to tail off. And on June 15th, the deputy in charge of the search was interviewed, and he said he felt that Thomas was lost in the desert because nobody in town had reported him missing. Kind of a blow to the community because everyone was rallying to find him. The following day, Thomas's son, a man named Colonel Earl Howard, who served in the World War as an Army artillery colonel, was now in the reserve, and he was editor of the Wheaton, Minnesota newspaper. He came out and immediately got very deep into the search issues, talked to all the searchers, talked to the leaders, and immediately posted a $100 reward trying to get people to go out into the field and look out in the desert. On the 18th, Colonel Howard got the Minnesota governor, who he knew, to call the Arizona governor and ask for the National Guard to be deployed to look for his dad. Something I would do. I think it's important. Well, the colonel was told by the Arizona governor that the sheriff had found the 10 best Indian trackers in Arizona, and they were attempting to follow and determine where Thomas was located. They had had no luck at all. Trackers had found nothing. Now, you say something about Indian trackers. I know a little bit about them. I've met quite a few. They're the best trackers in the world, no doubt. And they know the land. They know the way it's supposed to look. They know when something's bent, something's broken, grass, bush, heel prints. I was around a couple of these trackers years ago, and I learned so much from them. It was amazing. Well, on the 20th, the colonel raised a posse while the Indians were still searching. And late in the day, he was having major pain in one of his legs. That pain had started weeks earlier, and the doctor said that he had to have an operation. But he left and he came to Arizona anyhow. Late in the day, he called his physician, and the physician ordered him home to have a certain bone removed from the leg. So on the 21st, he left with no resolution. What happened over the course of the next several years is there were a large amount of bodies found in and around Tucson and in the desert. And everyone made the association that it had to be Thomas. Oh, it had to be Thomas. No, it had to be Thomas. No, it was never Thomas. And the peculiarities behind the case were brought up in the articles that the Indian trackers could never find a track. Tucson at this time was not a large city. Nobody reported seeing him. There was no way for him to get out of town. He didn't have money. $100 reward put people into the desert looking. Nothing was ever found. I searched out numerous years and could never find an article that found resolution on this case. Now, what I found interesting is that there was never anyone that said Thomas had an aging disease. I don't think they would have used dementia or Alzheimer's then. But what I didn't understand is nobody positively identified Thomas after he left his daughter's house. There was somebody who said, the people from the Arizona Bank of Trust, that this man did talk about going to Minnesota, and he did look like him, so maybe that was him. But what happened to him? Now, the Arizona National Guard was never deployed. It was a very frustrating event for the Howard family. And to think that in a desert where there's not a lot of bushes, not a lot of places to go, and in a small city at the time like Tucson, that he's never found, I think it's bizarre. Really bizarre. So, 2 cases. Anna G. Wilson, 46, missing east of Big Fork, Minnesota, 23 miles, retired teacher. And Travis Howard, 74 years old, missing May 31st, 1930, Tucson, Arizona. Friends, be nice to each other. Huck's looking across from me, looking at me. Dad, come on, let's go play. Be nice to your neighbors. Do something friendly for the people in your community. And if you can, give this video a thumbs up. Become a subscriber to our channel. And God's willing, I'll be back. Paulides out.